Hi, I'm Catherine Engelhardt Kronk, and I'm here today with Gary Gotze. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you.
We have been having some very interesting discussions about nonprofits and how they can succeed in transforming their organization for the 21st century. And something that you talked about in an earlier episode is something that I want to explore a little more deeply. We've talked about managing volunteers, diversifying funding, and really getting strategic about both recruiting and supporting donors, attracting donors. Could you talk a little more about that as, how, as an executive director or a development director or a staff person or a volunteer with a nonprofit can engage donors in a way that will motivate them to not only give once, but be a repeat donor, and also maybe give both time and money.
Right, absolutely.
And expertise.
I've been thinking about this for some time. I've been doing this for 32 years, and maybe 20 years ago I started to come up with this concept of heart, head, and hands, because I was starting to really think those were probably the three things that were most important when you were dealing with a donor, a potential donor and a donor. And it was really, really important when you were talking about keeping them as a donor. So
Sure.
If you think about it for a minute, most people have some emotional attachment to the organization.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, they don't. Some people will give just to be giving, but to get someone really to give to an organization, there has to be some kind of emotional touch to it. That's the heart. Appealing to a person's emotion, it's fine, it's okay, you should do that. It should be something that you do as a person seeking a financial contribution from them. But I don't believe by appealing to the emotions alone will you be able to sustain that donor over a long period of time.
That makes sense.
A good example is everybody knows the Jerry Lewis Labor Day Telethon, right? And these are true facts about this. The people that call the day of the Jerry Lewis Labor Day Telethon and make a pledge, do you know how many people don't actually pay the pledge?
I would bet it's very high because they just get excited for that moment.
Emotions. About 60% of them never pay the pledge.
Wow.
So it's an emotional appeal, and done the right way, I believe, in conjunction with other things, appealing to one's emotions for a charitable contribution is okay. And it's okay to do that and understand that. That's the heart side of it. The head is really, really important, particularly in today's day and age. No longer can it be just about, well, we want to make you feel good about your gift. More and more and more. Even donors who don't give large amounts of money still want to see what? Something happen with the money they gave.
Right. They want to see impact.
They want to see impact and results. That's the head part. That's the brain part. Okay, if I give my gift, what can I expect will happen?
And that's interesting because, now every grocery store you walk in, they ask you for a donation for cancer research or some sort of generally speaking, this general kind of need. And I really feel like I don't want to give money.
They're doing
even
that for them.
$1.
They're doing that for themselves. That goes back to a prior thing we talked about a couple of sessions ago, which was corporate alignment. That's corporate brand building. That isn't charitable giving. That's corporate brand building. And they're appealing to you to give to something to help them further themselves as a corporate entity.
And I think that's okay because there's a whole concept called shared value.
Sure.
Where if they get something out of it, they get a positive community position, and hopefully a nonprofit gets something out of it.
Right.
But where the disconnect for me is, I don't know where that money is, how that money is being used, and where it's really going. So you're right, I get this emotional moment like, who doesn't want to help kids with cancer?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I don't know where that money's going.
That's because your head came into play.
Yeah.
And you are I'm sure, a sophisticated donor in your own right, and it's one of those three things probably, at least if not two things, that drive your charitable giving, and more charities need to understand that. There's a big uproar right now in the funding world about charities saying, well, why do I have to provide all that information and data, and why do I have to prove my outcomes?
Right.
Because it's an absolute must now. The differentiation line between agency A and agency B isn't the name of the agency or even the people they serve. It's the results they can prove out.
Well, and there's no doubt that with the thousands of organizations that we serve, all of them are looking for technology that helps them in the process of developing and telling the story about outcomes-driven service and success. And we spend a lot of our time and money providing tools to just do just that, because it is so important now.
It's the future. Well, the future's now. The product you're providing is absolutely going to be essential for the organizations that survive in the future to have a way to clearly articulate what happened to the money when I gave it. Did a condition change in the community? Was I able to measure it? And am I able to prove it out to you as a donor?
Exactly.
And if they're not able to do that, the support starts to dwindle away over time.
Sure.
So you've got the heart, the head, and the hands.
Okay.
The hands are the volunteering piece of it. People, not everyone, but the overwhelming majority of people in today's philanthropic environment want to touch their philanthropy. I like to call it touch philanthropy, where they want to go out and see the stuff in action, or they want to be a mentor, or they want to be a big brother, a big sister, a coach. So they've got three things working simultaneously: the heart, the head, and the hand. They're emotionally attached to it. They're looking for quantitative data about, did something really happen? Can you prove it out to me? And they want to be part of it. They want to be part of the process. We took a group of corporate executives last year in Dallas over to a place called the Collier Center, which is the center where they help mostly kids, not exclusively kids, who are deaf. And they implant the cochlear implants in their ears. It's a fantastic operation. And we took these high-level corporate executives who were emotionally engaged because of the nature of what they do there.
Sure.
Who had scrubbed down all of the information and the outcomes. They can tell you that if a kid comes in this position with this kind of assessment, if they implant a cochlear implant, then the following will most likely happen 99.9% of the time. That sucked in those people even further because they're getting two of the three. And then the third thing is they said, help us renovate our facility. It looks bad. So
they
we
had
got
a specific, that's the hands. That was like,
we got CEO of Fortune 500 companies out for a whole Saturday with their families renovating the center, which in the end, by the way, looked world class. I couldn't believe the work that got done. And we got all three things at once. What came out of that? Some future partnerships that were never there before, because some of the company executives were so impressed that they said, we're going to continue to support your organization. Catherine, I can't tell you the number of nonprofit executives that I've watched who either don't believe it's a good use of their time to let corporations come in and do volunteer activities, or that it's intrusion on them, or that frankly they're a little bit lazy to do those kinds of things. They're missing the boat, because anytime you can attach a donor or a potential donor with their hands on the project inside of your organization, with your program at a more intimate level, the chances of them becoming a longer term supporter go up exponentially.
yeah. And well, I would say, as a former executive director of several organizations, I don't think I was ever lazy but I often felt like I don't have enough hours in the day. And if I don't know I'm going to get a benefit out of a
Yeah.
particular activity, it goes to the bottom of my list.
Yeah.
So help folks that are listening understand how they do quickly and effectively engage, the corporate stakeholders in the community.
Yeah.
To and do it in a way that's not going to take up all their time.
Yeah.
But that there will be some result. And I
Yeah.
think I know what you're going to say, but I want to hear.
Well, I'm going to say that you're going to be able to tell your story, which comes back to day one,
Okay.
in a succinct, compelling fashion. You've got to have a hook.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got to be
They
like
have to understand what they're
the
why they're
value
there.
proposition. You know
Yes.
what Disney's value proposition is?
No.
We make people happy. That's what they're in the business of doing. That's not their mission statement.
Right.
That's their value proposition. Good, strong, nonprofit organizations have to be able to clearly articulate a story, a value proposition, particularly to a corporate executive or the corporate community. Number two is they've got to create a so easy experience for somebody to interface with their agency that it's a no-brainer for them. It cannot be, you got to sign 32 forms and 16 checkoff boxes, and by the way, you can only do it on Tuesday at 3 o'clock every other month. Got to find a way to make it easy for the recipient. But the most important thing is you've got to be willing to share information on a regular basis with that potential client, donor, customer of your organization. And you've got to figure out a way to do that regularly. Not just one time, not just hit and miss, but on a regular basis with them. That's where the online stuff, I think, could be beneficial, where you may not be raising a dime with it,
But you're keeping them
but
engaged.
you're keeping
and
them
informed.
keeping them engaged in the program and in the work of your organization.
I know I used to be executive director of an organization that was a grief and loss center. Worked with folks who were going through a grieving process, and they had for years anyway done this dinner every Thursday night where the staff cooked for whomever was coming in, because it was one night with sick kids or children who were terminally ill or going through grief where they didn't have to cook a dinner. And when I came there as executive director, I asked for their permission and said, can we invite donors and corporate folks to come to dinner? It's it's a potluck and they'll bring something, and they were all pleased to do that. And our donations from those folks never failed to go up, because they got to talk to the folks who are really receiving the value from the organization. They got the emotional engagement, as well as we gave them a little handout on who we served and what we did and what the impact was.
Yeah.
And then they heard that story from the very
Right.
folks that were being served. So I know you can't always do that, but that's one way. I think you can get creative. I think that's what you're saying too.
Right.
Make it as easy as possible so it doesn't take extra time or very little. And do you think, how do you invite people to come to do that? I mean, if you don't really feel like you know the corporate community, the business community, how would you approach getting people in the door?
I'd look for intersections from my staff, my board, the clients who would be willing to share. Do they work in a company? Do they have a list of organizations or people that they might be able, where you might find a cross section?
Also, I know that chambers of commerce usually will have time in their meetings where they'll
Right.
let you do a 5-minute
Right.
presentation. Alliances like our Downtown Alliance here,
Mm-hmm.
so and that's free and easy, and they're only going to give you a few minutes.
Yeah. The CEO, the executive director, whatever the title is of, and I really believe this deep down to my soul, they have to be the face and the chief spokesperson for the organization for people to be attracted to it. I really believe that. And they've got to be a passionate leader, communicator, someone who can open the doors for the organization, make the connections for the organization, and really be that individual that builds the base of potential donors for the organization. They don't have to be the one necessarily coming up with the strategy and the plans. But they've got to take that responsibility on, in my estimation, if they're going to build the kind of organization that will be successful on a long term. I bet you did it.
I hope I did it. I tried to do it.
I bet you could tell your story.
Yes.
I bet you would do it in front of 2 people or 20,000 people.
Sure.
And it probably didn't require a teleprompter or a written speech for you to get up and explain why what you were doing through your organization was important in the community. And I bet that you always made the ask, not necessarily for money every time, but for some piece of action. Don't ever get out of a room without
Good advice to executive directors.
without asking for
Make
something.
the ask. Make the
Some
ask.
piece of action. And it doesn't always have to be
Be
about
money.
giving me money.
Yeah, it doesn't.
It's got to be something, though. I need your help with. Can you help me with?
This is good advice.
I used to
Gary.
tell people, you know, if they invite me in the room, they're going to expect me to ask for something. That's the nature of my business.
Yeah, that's right. That's
So
right.
why wouldn't you not be? They're not going to be offended if
No.
you ask for something.
They expect.
Expect it.
Well, thank you very much. This was helpful, very helpful, very interesting. Thanks, Gary.